Hey, just a heads up, don't expect this to be a return for my regular upload schedule. Take this as a brief update or a one-off video to acknowledge that I'm alive. Okay? Okay. Also, I now have Letterboxd, go check it out. A few months ago, after seeing The Fabelmans, not sure if that was relevant information, I decided to go into my local HMV and for the first time in years, pick out a DVD. For me in this situation, I am really picky, because if I ever do this, I'm only getting a film that I think has rewatchability and is never on streaming services. So I looked, and I found Alvin and the Chipmunks 1 to 4 box set. Okay, I'm joking. But what I did find was the Stanley Kubrick 4-film collection. Now, as someone who only knew a bit about Stanley Kubrick, plus the only film I ever watched of his beforehand was The Shining, I was aware that he was one of the greatest filmmakers of all time. And after watching these 4 films, and his entire filmography, I not only think that he's one of the best, but simply is the best. Just reading on his thirst for perfection and mastering every genre he attempted is simply incredible coming from someone who's interested in filmmaking. So it was no surprise that I'd eventually discover his movies and end up ranking them, so let's not waste any more time.
Well, this sucks.
Honestly, for a first film, this isn't bad, it's just not good. My one problem with Fear and Desire is that with every single one of Kubrick's movies, there's always something story-wise that keeps the audience hooked from beginning to end, such as how Rem and Barry's life will turn out, or will Alex stop his sadistic behaviour, both of these being the driving force of their respective films. Fear and Desire doesn't have anything for the audience to grasp onto, and as a result, left me bored. Also, it didn't help that I watched this on Amazon Prime, and for some reason it was restored to colour, even though it really didn't need to, because the version on Prime is awful. The colours are barely there to begin with, and even when they are, they look saturated. Obviously there's signs of a good movie, as I did say, in my opinion, that he is the greatest director of all time. Firstly, the locations. Obviously this was before he could make iconic sets, and this is a great first sign that he always used the location to his fullest. Secondly, the cinematography. Kubrick was a photographer before he became a filmmaker, so it makes sense why the framing and the shots are absolutely unique. You know what, I'll quickly say this before I talk about all his other films. Not a single one of Kubrick's films have bad cinematography. So hopefully I don't keep repeating myself.
You're repeating yourself. You're repeating yourself. You're
entering a world of pain.
Yeah, this isn't much of a step up from Fear and Desire. But I will start with a positive, that being the lighting, as it gives us iconic images and eye-catching scenes that Kubrick's films would be known for. Also, the final 10 minutes are intriguing and is what I think of when someone mentions this film, because of the brilliant use of sound and, once again, the lighting. But apart from them, that's really all the positives. Davy Gordon was not an interesting protagonist whatsoever. What do we learn about him by the end of this? That he's a boxer, and he's a nice guy. Not much else going to the story. As a result, it left me bored, with not just Gordon, but everyone else. The score is also really repetitive. This is something that I don't usually critique, as I normally love repetitive scores, such as the score for The Untouchables, as long as it's good, which this unfortunately isn't. If you can't tell, I'm really struggling to say anything about this. I'm really scraping the bottom of the barrel. Hopefully I'll be able to talk a lot about my next Kubrick film in this ranking.
And tonight, I'm gonna love to manhandle you!
Before I get myself into hot water, and I hope I can't stress how obvious this is, but I do not condone God. I'm not Humbert in this movie. But I don't condone the message of this movie. What am I? The only reason I watched it, and many others did, was because it has Kubrick's name on it. So Lolita. I do have to say this is the first movie on this list that I didn't dislike, though this is nothing to write home about. One thing that really surprised me was the tone and how comedic, yet dark it can get. And it kinda works. Mainly because the narrative is all over the place tonally, so they both coincide perfectly with each other. And it's also thanks to the hilarious performances by James Mason and especially Peter Sellers. I can see why Kubrick brought him back for Dr. Strangelove. What Kubrick does like to grasp onto in his films, and I'll probably say this later on, is the humanity in the world. And you can see this with the characters' relationships with each other, especially the interactions between Lolita and her mother, simply because of the subjects that they find each other conflicting on, and how they respond to them. However, the story after the first half gets boring really quickly, as there's just nothing to get invested in except for what Humbert will do after Lolita's mother's death. Not in that way. But the real crime this movie commits, outside of its paedophilic themes, is calling a character Humbert. Oh god. Joy, this was a segment to get through.
Peter, the horse is here.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot to love about the killing, but at the same time there's quite a lot to critique. For starters, I think the plot is really interesting, especially during the final third. It's just such an interesting premise that pays off wonderfully in the end. However, I think how it's structured is where I draw the line. Its non-linear plot had me really confused at certain points in this movie, as there are simply too many times where time jumps back and forth, which leaves me wondering, is all this even necessary? If anything, this makes me think Pulp Fiction is one of the greatest films of all time because of how well structured its non-linear plot is.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I break your concentration?
And it's not even my favourite Tarantino movie.
What?
Along with the confusing narrative, I also think that this is the worst shot Kubrick film. And I'm not saying this movie's cinematography is bad. Overall, it's alright. It's just with his other films, his cinematography was on another level compared to anything else you'll ever see, really. Overall, this is where I see the most improvement from Kubrick during his early work, as he managed to have memorable characters and a tight plot, which both Fear and Desire and Killer's Kiss missed. And I do think this speaks to what Kubrick can do as a director with such a basic premise given to him. Okay, people may get mad at me that I put this so low. Just hear me out. This isn't a bad film. I think Clockwork Orange is really good. It's just Kubrick made a lot more films that were even better. Tonally, this film is brilliant, managing to make me somehow sympathise with Alex by the end despite the horrific crimes him and his friends commit earlier on in the film. The use of music is absolutely phenomenal, putting a nightmarish aspect towards Singing in the Rain that I had no idea was simply possible, to the point where I have no idea what to feel whenever I hear that song anymore. Is it happiness? Is it negativity? I don't know anymore. And again, like Fear and Desire, Kubrick makes a great choice of locations used, which still surprised me that this film was made with a $1.3 million budget. This is just an incredible example of a filmmaker making great use of the budget given. If I did have to complain about this film, I would say that the second act doesn't really connect too well with the first and third. Maybe I'm missing something, but as soon as Alex gets arrested and put in prison, the story comes to a complete stop at that point.
Oh, my nose.
And that's such a shame because for the majority of Kubrick's films, the first shot gets me hooked from the beginning, and A Clockwork Orange is certainly a great example. So to see it go to waste by the second third is kinda sad. If it sounds like I hate this film, I don't. It's just Kubrick made quite a few better films, before and after this.
It appears we've been boarded by another ship.
Might be another hot take, but forget about it. Barry Lyndon is, without a doubt, the best looking film I've ever seen in my life. The cinematography, along with the unique lenses crafted just for this film, blend brilliantly, as every camera shot completely immerses you in the time period. Period pieces are usually hit or miss genre for me, as there are some that I just completely disregard, and some that I just embrace with open arms, and Barry Lyndon is definitely one of them. Also the battle scenes, magnificent. If there's one thing Kubrick can do brilliantly, along with every single filmmaking aspect, it's direct extras, as every single one is set out how they should be, and act as human as the protagonist, meaning that even if you slightly lost focus of Barry Lyndon, you're absolutely guaranteed to be drawn towards a random soldier. If there was one complaint that I'd give to this film, it's that I really couldn't care less about Lord Bullingdon. Every scene that has him and Barry arguing over something minuscule couldn't deter me from the story even more, except from their duel. But apart from that, it's fantastic. Yes, it's 3 hours long, but with how well it immerses you into this world, that runtime flies by.
There, close your eyes. Close your eyes. Close them.
For what Kubrick called his best work, I don't see it. And even though Eyes Wide Shut is magnificent, there's still other Kubrick films that offer more. What I would say lowers this movie from the ones above it is that you really don't feel anything when you're done watching it. Maybe it's because its premise on the surface is basic, but when you go through the layers it's actually sort of scary and mind-blowing. I was completely engaged with this secret cult as soon as I was aware of its existence, thanks to the mystery that surrounds the identity of the people involved and why they're there in the first place. Tom Cruise serves as a great insider into this mysterious cult, as he pretty much does this in real life. But at the same time, if you want to see the best Tom Cruise performance from 1999, just watch Magnolia. Nicole Kidman is also really good, but my only problem with her isn't Nicole herself, it's the fact that the promotion lied to everyone thinking that this was a movie about Nicole and Tom, when in reality it's mostly Tom. Also, believe it or not, this was filmed in England. Only some establishing shots were filmed in New York. I mention that because after Spartacus he filmed every movie in England, and it shows how much attention to detail he put into his production design. It looks completely believable from the second the film starts right until the end, helping me lose myself more into his films. Also, it's the only film he's in. Right there. There he is. I didn't know if that was a good way to end this segment, but at least it didn't end like The Sopranos where it just cut to black mid-sentence.
I'm Spartacus.
I'm Spartacus. That guy's Spartacus.
I'm incredibly surprised I've ranked Spartacus this high. I'm unsure if this is the first historical epic I've ever watched, but if it is, then I cannot wait to see more. Just going through Spartacus's life alone is incredibly interesting, from his escape from slavery to the large-scale battle near the end, because of how brilliantly paced it is. There are too many moments to count where we're waiting for a character to snap or an event to occur, and when they happen, they're left in your mind for a long time. This is because of how well Kubrick executes Dalton Trumbo's script. It's so surprising how little creative freedom Kubrick had with this, such as only working on half the film's cinematography, the constant feuds with Kirk Douglas behind the scenes, and, as I just mentioned, he didn't even work on the script. I would argue though that he only made this film to further his career, so come on, leave him alone. The scale of this movie is also incredible, better than Barry Lyndon in my opinion. Yeah, I said it. I also think Spartacus is one of the best protagonists on this list, as we learn so much in such a short, or not so short, amount of time, thanks to Kirk Douglas's brilliant performance. We go through a man's life with both a convincing depiction of this man's life and a sense of humanity. Despite the limitations Kubrick had, this is still a great film. It's just, this could have been so much better if he had full creative control, which wasn't a problem for these next 5. If you think that I'm saying the full title of this film incredibly fast, then you're sorely mistaken. Fine, I'll do it. But in one take. Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. There, you happy? Anyway, Dr. Strangelove is probably Kubrick's first true film. Everything about this is his own style, from the adapted screenplay, to the cinematography, to the complex themes it tackles. Every element that you associate with his films is here, and continued here for years to come. The performances are also exceptional. George C. Scott is absolutely hilarious in every scene he's in. His facial expressions and over-the-top body language is what sells it for me. And how can I not talk about Peter Sellers playing 3 different characters? The depth of each performance is so different to one another that not only do I think this is one of the best performances of all time, but whenever the President and Dr. Strangelove are on screen, I completely believe that they're 2 different people. The film is also a brilliant comedy. On a rewatch I was laughing a lot more than the first time, mainly because the first time you're more concentrated on the story, wondering how both sides can possibly avoid nuclear war. So the second time around the jokes really hit you more often, as well as the little aspects in the performances that also make it funny. If this isn't a sign that Kubrick's films are some of the most rewatchable movies ever, then I don't know what is.
France is a country you have to drive through to get to Italy.
If someone were to say to me what my favourite war movie was, this would be a top 3 for sure. The originality that Kubrick brings to the war genre in Paths of Glory is something I don't think any film after it, except maybe another film on this list and Dunkirk, could ever replicate, especially the cinematography. To me, this is the first truly visual-looking Kubrick film. All his signature shots are here, from the tracking shots to the extremely wide centre shots that pulls this away from any other film you'll see, made around this time period. For being less than an hour and 30 minutes of runtime, Kubrick doesn't miss a beat. The intense build-up to going over the top, the scarily unfair conviction of the 3 soldiers, and their unfortunate executions are, no pun intended, executed so brilliantly that it makes you think on a much deeper level on the aspects of World War I. Or any war movie from outside the cruel battles, and from a perspective of how some soldiers were unfairly treated, just for serving their country. It also amazes me that this is a film barely about war, but rather the negative aspects that affect people because of war, which shows us in the most unsettling way possible the humanity that comes with it, which is a theme that Kubrick always touches upon. Just watch Paths of Glory. It's probably the easiest Kubrick film to watch thanks to the runtime, especially compared to his other films like Barry Lyndon, Spartacus, Shark Tale.
Here's Benji.
Gonna be hard to talk about The Shining without saying a point that no one has said yet, but I'll try. The Shining is probably my favourite horror film, simply because its simplicity is all that it needs to make me feel uneasy. It doesn't rely on jump scares, but even when it does, such as when Jack strikes Scatman with an axe, yes, that's his real name, and the use of the editing during the iconic scene with the twins. Basically what I'm saying is, what makes this scary is how natural everything is that's scary. It is not the plot, but it certainly drives it. Also, I cannot get enough of the manor. It is certainly one of the best locations, not only in any horror film, but any film ever. There's just so much mystery surrounding it and its background, which gives us a fair understanding of why it's abandoned, and why Jack ends up going insane. And the maze, oh my. The scale of it, the impact it has on the final act, which leads to Danny covering his footprints from his dad, which is one of the smartest decisions in any horror film. I think we can all agree on that. So, come on. It's The Shining. For me and many others, it was our introduction to Kubrick's vision, and still continues to be spoofed, referenced, and parodied to this very day.
Yeah!
Did that tree just speak Vietnamese?
Just like Paths of Glory, Full Metal Jacket is a war film, but it doesn't focus on the fighting aspect. It focuses on the reality that thousands of young people had to unknowingly pay during the Vietnam War, which is why it's possibly my favourite war film. From the beginning of the movie, where we're sucked into the repetitiveness of the army camp, is frankly unbelievable. I dare any of you who's watched this to find one fault with this section of the movie. The use of production design is not only one of the most unique because it doesn't portray Vietnam as a jungle-ridden battleground, it is also one of the best uses in cinema history. All the characters are fleshed out flawlessly, giving each individual only a few minutes of runtime, but just enough so that we understand their morals, which makes us feel like we've known them for years, making a majority of their eventual deaths so heartbreaking. The soundtrack is easily the best out of any of Kubrick's films, from the light-hearted juxtapositional use of surfing bird during a conflict, to the ending scene of all the soldiers singing about Mickey Mouse, which is genius. It's a little reminder that these people, being drafted off to experience the harsh conditions of war, were still only kids. After all, the average age of a Vietnam soldier was only 19. It does suck that this was overshadowed by Platoon, because this is definitely one film you should see before you die, and it's only number 2 on this list.
Let's go to the moon!
We're not going to the moon, we're going home.
Words could never truly experience how I felt about 2001. From the moment I put this in my DVD player and pressed play, and I heard that music for the first time ever during a movie, I felt brainwashed. This is easily the best example of Kubrick dominating any genre he stepped foot in, which is why I think he's the greatest of all time. The mystery surrounding this film has always intrigued me, even after seeing it. Kubrick just gives some of the pieces of the film to the audience to let them fill in the blanks, which is why it's simply genius. Every frame of 2001 is a painting. There is just so much to analyse, from the props to the set designs to the costumes. It's no wonder that most sci-fi films after this, like Star Wars and Alien, look and feel the way they do. There are also so many shots in this movie that puzzle me into wondering how they managed to get certain camera shots, which is something I rarely think about during the film, let alone multiple times. The pacing can sometimes be a bit slow in some spaces, but if you're like me and are brainwashed from start to finish, you're begging for it to be slow. It does suck that this is the only film that gave Kubrick an Oscar, and that Oscar was for visual effects of all things. But at least he managed to get one, unlike Alfred Hitchcock. Unlucky lad. So, what else is there for me to say? It's 2001. It's without a doubt one of the best experiences you'll ever have watching a movie, and it's undoubtedly Kubrick's best. So, there we go. Honestly, looking at all of Kubrick's films and slowly seeing how he progressed his art was incredibly interesting. I know some of my placements of films were probably unusual, but at the end of the day, they're just my opinions, alright. So I can now defend Spartacus with my life. Get out of here. Get out of here.